Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Susan Hearn, CEO of Germane Solutions, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar, Strategic Marketing for GME Programs, Defining Identity and Driving Match Success. During today's webinar, attendees will learn how to define a clear and differentiated program identity by articulating strengths, priorities, culture, and outcomes in a way that stands out in a competitive GME landscape. They'll align program positioning with institutional strategy, workforce demands, evolving applicant expectations to drive more targeting and effective recruitment. Develop a cohesive and compelling narrative that consistently communicates your program's value across all recruitment materials and touchpoints. And optimize the applicant journey and digital presence to enhance visibility, engagement, and overall recruitment outcomes from initial awareness through the match. Before I introduce today's speakers, there's a few administrative items to note. Participants have been muted upon entry to the session. If for any reason your audio is showing as unmuted, please mute yourself and eliminate background noise during the presentation. We've made every effort to eliminate technical issues, but if you have problems, please indicate them to Maya Belmore in a private chat. This live presentation and webinar broadcasts are provided exclusively for the use of registrants and should not be shared. Reproducing, distributing, or transmitting any session materials of the live presentation to any group or individual requires express permission from Germane Solutions. If you have questions throughout the session, please submit them in the chat feature. We encourage you to ask your questions as they come up, as well as during the dedicated question and answer time at the end of the session. If we can't get through all the questions in the allotted time, or if you have a question you don't want to share publicly, please submit them via email afterwards to Hunter Rich. Every registered participant in this session will receive an email containing a link to our survey so we can obtain feedback about the webinar. The survey is brief and we encourage your comments. Now let me introduce today's speakers, Kelsey Barnes and Hunter Rich. Kelsey is a director at Germane Solutions and brings more than a decade of healthcare and GME expertise to today's conversation. She works closely with sponsoring institutions, health systems, and training programs to support strategic growth, accreditation success, and long-term sustainability. Through her work in program development, organizational strategy, and stakeholder engagement, Kelsey helps institutions define their strengths, communicate their value, and position their programs for success. Hunter is the manager of marketing and customer success at Germane Solutions, where he leads the firm's marketing and client success strategy, advancing growth, brand eminence, and client engagement. He has over a decade of experience in the digital marketing space and works closely with GME leaders and institutions to develop effective communication strategies, strengthen program visibility, and create meaningful engagement opportunities throughout the recruitment lifecycle. Today, Kelsey and Hunter together bring a unique blend of GME operational expertise and marketing strategy. Their work focuses on helping programs clearly define who they are, communicate their value effectively, and create a consistent applicant experience across every touch point. By aligning program identity, messaging, and digital presence, they help institutions strengthen efforts and position themselves for long-term success in an increasingly competitive environment. Now let me turn the session over to our speakers.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Before we can think about specific recruitment tactics, we have to start with something more fundamental, and that is program identity. One common challenge we see when working with residency and fellowship programs is that many programs are excellent, but they struggle to clearly articulate what makes them different. And in today's environment where applicants are comparing dozens of programs, that differentiation really does matter. Therefore, program identity isn't just a branding exercise, it's really foundational to the recruitment strategy. It influences how applicants perceive your program, whether they decide to apply, and ultimately how they rank you. A strong identity serves three purposes. First, it helps establish your position within the broader GME landscape. Second, it shapes applicant perceptions and expectations. And third, it creates a consistent narrative that carries through everything from your website through interview day conversations. The programs that often recruit most effectively for their ideal candidate aren't necessarily the biggest or most prestigious. They're often the ones that have a clear understanding of who they are and who they're looking for to attract to their program. When we think about defining program identity, we encourage programs to focus on 4 key dimensions as shown here, which are strength, priorities, culture, and outcomes. Starting with strengths, this is where you identify the clinical experiences, faculty expertise, patient populations, and educational opportunities that define your training environment. What are residents actually exposed to, and what skills are they developing as a result? Next are priorities. Every program makes intentional choices about where they invest their time and resources, whether that's research, primary care, procedural training, community engagement, or leadership development. Those priorities should be clear. Culture is often a very important factor as well in applicant decision-making. They want to understand what it's like to train in your program. They want to know, how do people interact? How are residents supported by faculty? How are residents supported by each other? And what are the expectations of the program? And finally, outcomes is important, i.e. what happens after training. Fellowship placement, board performance, leadership positions, or retention in your health system can all be important indicators of program success. Together, these 4 areas create the foundation of program identity that's authentic, measurable, and meaningful to your applicants. Once you've identified your strengths, priorities, culture, and outcomes from the last slide, the next step is translating those elements into positioning. One mistake programs often make is simply listing out their features. Applicants see hundreds of programs with strong faculty, excellent training, and supportive cultures. Those statements alone don't help them understand what makes your program unique. Instead, positioning requires a synthesis. It's about bringing multiple strengths together into one cohesive story, not just what you offer, but why it matters. Relevance is equally important. The strongest messaging connects directly to what applicants are evaluating. Things like autonomy, flexibility, mentorship, career preparation, and overall quality of life really do carry a significant weight for the applicants. We also need consistency, and you'll hear Hunter and I say this a lot of times throughout this webinar. If resident wellness, for example, is a major differentiator, applicants should hear that messaging from your website, they should hear from your residents, your faculty should talk about it, and your leadership team should also be talking about it. And finally, clarity. Big statements create uncertainty, while specific examples and concrete details help applicants understand exactly what they can expect and allow them to determine whether your program is the right fit for them in the long run. The final step in this process is identifying the differentiators that truly separate your program from the competitors. We at Germane encourage programs to focus on 2 or 3 core differentiators rather than trying to be everything to everyone. The more focused and specific you can be, the more memorable you'll become. Those differentiators should also be supported by proof points. Applicants increasingly want evidence behind the claims, whether that's procedural volume information, fellowship placement rates, board pass rates, research productivity, or alumni outcomes. Data really does add credibility beyond just the statements. Specificity is also critical. So rather than saying you offer a diverse training environment, explain what that means to your program. What settings do residents rotate through? What patient populations do they serve? What experiences are unique to your program? And ultimately, differentiation isn't about attracting every single candidate. It's about attracting the right applicants. So the goal overall is alignment. When your applicants clearly understand your mission, culture, and training model, they are better able to determine whether your program is a place where they will thrive.
Thanks, Kelsey. Diving into strategic positioning. Strategic positioning is where your program identity becomes actionable. It's the process of taking everything that makes your program unique, like Kelsey was talking about, and really translating it into this clear, compelling story that actually resonates with applicants and supports your organizational goals. One of the biggest misconceptions in GME recruitment marketing is that positioning is only describing your program, when in reality, positioning is about creating that relevance. It's not just communicating who you are, like Kelsey said, but it's helping applicants understand why they should care about you and your program. There are three areas that I want to focus on. The first is effective positioning. Starts with aligning your program with those broader organizational objectives. As we know, GME programs don't operate in a vacuum or in isolation. They exist within larger health systems, academic institutions, and communities. As a result, positioning should connect your program strengths to those organizational priorities, such as workforce development, service line growth, community impact, and any other long-term strategic goals. From there, positioning becomes the bridge between your program identity and that strategy and action. It takes the characteristics that make your program unique and transforms them into this targeted recruitment approach. So rather than communicating everything to everyone, like Kelsey said, positioning really helps organizations focus on that point of differentiation or the messages that matter most to the audiences that you're trying to connect with. Lastly, the goal is to leverage positioning for better targeted recruitment outcomes. I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here today. But success isn't measured by attracting the most or the largest number of applicants, but it's measured by attracting the right applicants. So individuals whose goals, whose values and expectations really align with what your program can offer. So when positioning is done well, recruitment becomes more intentional, messaging becomes more effective, and applicants can gain a clear understanding of where they belong. As we think about positioning a residency or fellowship program, one of the biggest mistakes that we see all the time is treating GME as that standalone initiative. And as we all know, GME does not happen in this vacuum. In reality, the most successful programs are deeply connected to those broader goals of their health system. So positioning isn't just about attracting applicants. It's really about communicating why this program exists, where the organization is headed, and so that future vision and really how learners can fit into this future and that puzzle. Here, I want to focus on three areas and encourage you to consider first, alignment with those health system growth priorities. So if your organization is investing in key service lines or expanding access to care or developing any future clinical capabilities, your recruitment messaging should reflect those priorities. Applicants want to understand not only what the program is doing today, but again, where the organization is headed and what that future looks like. Second, this is really crucial, but your stage of GME development matters. A new teaching hospital has a very different story and a very different narrative than those mature academic institutions. New programs often have the opportunity to emphasize innovation or growth and the ability for residents to help shape culture and build something meaningful. And then finally, I want to look at mission alignment. So whether your institution is community-based, rural, academically focused, or committed to serving underserved populations, that mission should be visible throughout your entire positioning and messaging. Increasingly, as we discussed in our last GME marketing webinar, applicants are really looking for programs that align with their own personal values and professional aspirations. So effective positioning really sits at the intersection of organizational strategy, educational opportunity, and your institution's mission. So when those three elements are effectively aligned, recruitment messaging becomes far more authentic and compelling. So we've talked about aligning positioning with institutional goals, but there's another lens that's equally important, and that's workforce strategy. Health systems are not just creating residency programs because they want to teach a lot of the times, but they're creating them because they have this need, right? And this need for clinicians or physicians. One of the biggest shifts we've seen over the last couple of years is this newfound emphasis on workforce strategy, not simply an educational strategy. Organizations are facing a growing physician shortage, increasing competition for talent, and growing pressure to recruit and retain physicians in their communities. As a result, program positioning should directly support those workforce developmental goals. Three considerations that I want to look at, and the first is specialty and geographic demand. So organizations should really think carefully about the workforce needs that they are trying to tackle and address to ensure that their positioning actually reflects that reality. For example, a rural program may highlight broad scope training, community engagement, and opportunities to practice in those underserved areas because those are the physicians that that community needs most. The second consideration is retention and pipeline development. So we often talk about residency recruitment, but from the health system perspective, the goal isn't to fill these residency positions. The goal is to develop future physicians who remain with the organization after training. So positioning can support that objective by highlighting career pathways, mentorship opportunities, physician leadership development, and the long-term opportunities available within that health system. And then finally, organizations should consider alignment with their care delivery model. So healthcare continues to evolve. That's no secret. Team-based care, interdisciplinary collaboration, and population health initiatives are becoming increasingly important. Programs that can demonstrate how residents train within these unique care environments often create a stronger and more differentiated value proposition. So strong positioning should answer two questions. The first is, why should a learner choose this program? And the second is, how does this program help the organization build the workforce it needs for the future? We talked a lot about aligning positioning with organizational goals and workforce needs, but unfortunately, none of this matters if the messaging doesn't resonate with the people that you're trying to recruit. One of the most common mistakes that we see in this space is organizations spending a tremendous amount of time talking about themselves and very little time talking about what applicants actually care about. Again, if you have any interest in this topic, I would encourage you to check out Kelsey and I's webinar from last year. It's really focused on how to recruit this new generation of learners. So effective positioning requires us to shift our perspective. So instead of asking, what do we want to share with applicants? We really need to sit with the question, what are applicants trying to learn as they evaluate our program? Today's applicants are comparing a lot of programs. They're looking for signals that help them determine whether a program aligns with their professional goals, those learning preferences even, and especially with this younger generation, their personal and professional values. So again, three considerations for us to look at here. The first is understanding those applicant priorities. So while every specialty and applicant is different, there are several themes that constantly emerge. Applicants want to understand the quality of training that they'll receive, the level of autonomy that they'll develop, the culture of the program, but really the outcomes that they can expect after graduation. Second, applicant expectations continue to evolve, and we've highlighted that theme a lot today. The next generation of physicians is evaluating programs much differently than previous generations. Wellness, schedule transparency, flexibility, mentorship opportunities, psychological safety, really that purpose-driven work are more increasingly important factors in this newfound decision-making. So organizations don't need to change who they are. These things have been existing, but they do need to change how they are communicating these aspects of their learner experiences. And then finally, strong positioning helps applicants assess fit. One of the most valuable things a program can do is help applicants determine whether they will thrive in their environment. The goal is not to attract everyone, but the goal is to attract the right people at the right time. That's where resident stories, testimonials, cultural focus messaging, and again, authentic program narratives become increasingly powerful. They help applicants answer that important question of, can I actually see myself here? So when positioning is done well, applicants don't understand what your program offers. They understand who succeeds there and why.
Thanks, Hunter. Once your positioning is established, the next focus becomes communication. A strong program identity doesn't really create the value you're looking for unless applicants can understand it clearly. Messaging is what translates your positioning into language that resonates with prospective residents and fellows. So at its core, effective messaging does three things. It clearly communicates your value proposition. It helps applicants understand why your program is distinct, and it creates consistency across the entire recruitment process. One thing we often emphasize with programs is that applicants don't experience your program through a single touch point. They're interacting with websites, with social media, your ARIS descriptions, your virtual events, and your residents, faculty, and interview day experiences. Because of that, messaging needs to be intentional and coordinated across these channels. Applicants should hear the same themes repeatedly, regardless of where they're engaging with your program. There's that consistency again. When messaging is clear and consistent, it reinforces credibility and it makes it easier for applicants to understand why your program might be a strong fit for them. A strong narrative starts with a clear value proposition. In simple terms, that's the answer to the question, why should an applicant choose your program over other options? Your value proposition should connect with what your program provides and specifically the outcomes your target applicants are caring about. So as Hunter mentioned, it's important to highlight what you are providing, but really focusing on how the applicants are taking it and what they're looking for, and looking through that lens is going to be so important. It's also important to frame your story through their perspective. So all of your messaging should, again, match that lens, the way that they're looking at things. As Hunter mentioned, programs often focus on their own internal features, their own perspective of the program, but applicants are evaluating those features in comparison with their own goals and priorities. So for example, an applicant may care less about the existence of a particular curriculum and more about how the curriculum helps them achieve their career goals, gain autonomy, or prepare for fellowship. Finally, to keep messaging focused, we recommend identifying 2 to 3 core themes that consistently appear across all recruitment materials. Those themes become the backbone of your narrative and help make it memorable and cohesive throughout. When building messaging, creating the right balance of simplicity and specificity can be your greatest asset. Programs will often use broad phrases like comprehensive training, supportive culture, or excellent clinical experience. While those statements are often very true, they are often also very general and they don't create much impact for the trainees because they hear them so many times. Instead, you'll want to focus on clarity. Explain exactly what the applicants will experience in relation to these messaging phrases. What will they do for rotations? What opportunities for quality improvement and patient safety will they have? What support structures exist, et cetera? So make it specific and clear. Specificity is what turns the messaging into something credible as well. So supporting claims with measurable outcomes, examples, and data points help applicants trust what they're hearing. And like Hunter mentioned, and like we mentioned in our previous presentation, having that data behind is something this kind of newer generation of learners is really looking for. They're looking for those credentials and making sure that they can kind of believe what's being said to them. Language also plays an important role in differentiation. Many programs will use similar terminology, so defining what those terms mean in your specific environment can also be powerful. For example, if you're talking about autonomy, explain how autonomy actually shows up in your specific training program. What decisions are they making? At what stage are they making them? Under what level of supervision, etc. The goal here is to move from generic descriptions to meaningful stories that help applicants actually visualize themselves in your program. And finally, for this section, one of the most overlooked aspects of recruitment is consistency. Here it is again. Applicants form impressions over time through many different interactions, and every one of those interactions is going to reinforce your narrative or weaken it. Your website, your social media, your AERS descriptions, your faculty conversations, the interactions they have with residents, and the interview day presentation should all tell the same story. That doesn't mean that they're going to say the exact same thing. It just means that they'll reinforce the same themes and priorities throughout. Resident voices are also especially important because applicants often view them as the most authentic source of information. So when residents naturally validate the messaging presented elsewhere, it significantly strengthens credibility. That's why it's so important too, when you think about messaging, that it be true to the experience at the current time rather than aspirational, because if they're hearing one thing in messaging and then residents are saying something else, it really hurts credibility overall. Likewise, faculty and leadership should understand the key themes that the program is trying to communicate so they can also be on brand with that communication. Like I said, small inconsistencies might seem minor, but applicants often notice them and it really erodes trust. With consistency being the thing that primarily would build that trust. And trust definitely plays a significant role in how applicants evaluate program fit and when they make ranking decisions.
Thanks, Kelsey. Now we'll move into digital presence and visibility. So driving into digital presence and visibility, I really want to focus on the conversation on where applicants actually experience your positioning. So applicants begin evaluating programs. They're rarely starting with a faculty member or a resident, especially this new generation of learners. They're likely starting online. So even before they attend an interview, submit an application, or participate in a virtual event, they're exploring your website, searching for information, reviewing your social media content, and developing informing perceptions about your program. In many ways, your digital presence has become your first interview. That's why the first consideration here is understanding the importance of first impressions in that digital environment. Applicants often make assumptions about your program's culture, organization, credibility, and professionalism based on the quality of your digital presence. So whether that's fair or not, those perceptions begin forming almost immediately. The second consideration I want to highlight is alignment with your program's identity. One of the most common issues we see here is that disconnect between how a program wants to be perceived and what applicants actually encounter online. If your differentiators are culture, innovation, autonomy, community engagement, those strengths should be consistently reflected throughout your digital channels. So think your website, your social content, and messaging. As Kelsey mentioned, here comes the consistency word. They should all tell the same story. And then lastly, I want to focus on how programs must ensure that their content is accessible and discoverable. Applicants should not have to work overtime to find basic information about your program. So if details about benefits, faculty, or application requirements are really difficult to locate, applicants are likely to move on to another program that provides that information more clearly. The reality is that today's applicants expect the same digital experience they encounter in every other part of their lives. So think easy to find, easy to navigate, and easy to understand. So your digital presence should serve as a direct extension of your positioning strategy. It should reinforce who you are, what makes your program unique, and why an applicant should take the next step in learning more. If your website is the primary destination applicants visit during their evaluation process, which we know it likely is, then we need to think carefully about the experience they're having once they arrive there. When we work with organizations on recruitment strategy, the website is often the first place we start because it serves as the central hub for all of that applicant information. Applicants discover through social media, conferences, or search engines about your program, but eventually they almost always land on your website. And at that point, your website either reinforces interest or creates friction. There are four components that I want us to look at on ways that you can optimize your programmatic website. The first is providing that clear program overview, as simple as it sounds. But within just a few seconds, applicants should understand who you are, what makes your program unique, where training occurs, and the opportunities available to them. Like I said, if they have to dig or search for this through multiple pages to understand even the basics, there's a good chance that they'll leave. The next is navigation. So one of the easiest ways to improve the applicant experience is by making information easy to find. I know that sounds so intuitive, but you would be surprised at how complex some of these programmatic websites actually are. So think rotation schedules, call expectations, curriculum details, applicant requirements. They should all be clearly organized and intuitively structured. So remember, applicants aren't visiting your website because they want to explore it. They're visiting because they're looking for answers. Third, your content must be comprehensive and current. One of the quickest ways to undermine your own credibility, as Kelsey was saying, is with outdated information. Applicants notice this really quickly, especially when like resident profiles have been updated for years, or maybe your schedules reference previous academic years. So your website should reflect the program as it exists today, not as it existed 3 years ago. And then finally, we need to look at mobile accessibility. A significant percentage of applicants, especially this newer generation, are reviewing your programs on their phone. If your website doesn't function well on mobile devices, again, you're creating the unnecessary friction and barriers to engagement. One of the simplest website audits that I recommend is just asking someone outside of your program or organization to find three things. So ask them to find your call schedule, your benefits information, and your applicant requirements. So if they struggle to find them, applicants are likely to struggle too. So while your website serves as that central source of information, as we mentioned, applicants are increasingly looking beyond just your website to really understand what life at your program actually looks like. Applicants are actively researching programs across multiple digital platforms. They're visiting Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and many other online spaces to gain a more holistic understanding of your program. In many ways, social media, especially now, is an extension of the recruitment experience. The first consideration that I want us to look at is maintaining a consistent social media presence. Programs don't necessarily need to post every day. I wouldn't recommend that, but they should maintain an active and intentional presence that actually reflects their priorities and identity. Consistent content really helps reinforce program culture and demonstrate that your program is engaged and relevant. Second, social media creates a unique opportunity to showcase the resident experience. So while your website really focuses on your program structure and requirements, social media allows organizations to tell a more human story. Applicants really want to understand what training feels like, what those relationships look like in action, and what life is like outside of just those clinical responsibilities. I always think of like content like resident spotlights, day in the life features, interview highlights, resident takeovers. All of these provide those authentic insights that applicants can't find on your website per se. And then finally, digital channels create an opportunity for engagement. Today's applicants expect accessibility and, as Kelsey said, a lot of transparency. They appreciate programs that communicate openly, answer questions, share timely updates, and create those opportunities for interaction and engagements. Really, applicants are evaluating more than your curriculum. They're evaluating a community. Social media and digital engagement provide an opportunity to bring that community to life, and in a way that traditional recruitment materials often cannot. Creating great content is important, but it only creates values if applicants can find it, which is why search visibility and applicant discovery is crucial. So as I mentioned, one of the realities of today's recruitment environment is that applicants are conducting those extensive independent research before they ever really engage with a program directly. Like I said, they're searching specialties, comparing institutions, reviewing training opportunities, and exploring other programs. And as a result, programs must ensure that they are visible during this entire search and discovery process. The first area that I want us to look at is integration with institutional websites as it directly impacts really that visibility and discovery access. Many residency and fellowship programs exist within that larger health system or academic medical centers. So while these organizations often have really robust and well-rounded websites, the GME content can sometimes get kind of buried beneath all of those layers and can be super difficult to find. Applicants should be able to move seamlessly from the health system website to those program-specific information without having to navigate just like multiple layers of content. The easier it is to find your program, the more likely applicants are to continue exploring it. Secondly, I want to highlight how essential consistency is across platforms. Applicants rarely rely on just one single source of truth. Like Kelsey said, they're reviewing eras, institutional websites, social media channels, and other online resources simultaneously. When information differs across all of these platforms, it creates confusion and reduces confidence. Program descriptions, applicant requirements, contact information even should all be aligned wherever applicants encounter them. And then finally, organizations should think strategically about SEO or search engine optimization. So at its core, SEO is simply ensuring that your content aligns with how applicants search for information naturally. If someone is researching an IM program in Nashville or a rural FM program in the Midwest, your content should clearly communicate those identifiers and be searchable. So effective SEO isn't about gaming Google or other search engines. It's about making it easier for the right applicants to find your program at the right time. So overall, applicant discovery should really never be left to chance. Strong programs deserve to be found, and thoughtful search visibility strategies help ensure that they are. We've talked a lot about visibility and helping applicants find your program, but visibility alone often isn't enough. So once applicants arrive, the quality of that experience shapes how they perceive your program and whether or not they're going to continue engaging. One of the most important concepts that I want to leave you with is that applicants don't separate their digital experience from their perception of your program, especially with these new generations of learners. To them, this is all the same. The quality of your website, your content, your ease of use, and really overall digital presence directly influence how applicants view your organization, how they view your culture, and how they view your commitment to education. So there are 4 things that I want us to review. First, applicants expect ease of use and intuitive navigation. Today's applicants are navigating many programmatic websites throughout their recruitment process, and they're looking for quick access to information and clear answers. Like we said, if applicants struggle to locate those details, frustration can quickly become part of the perception of your program. Second, visual and content quality matter, which is crazy to say, but applicants often interpret the quality of digital content as an actual reflection of organizational investment and professionalism. So high quality photography, strong storytelling, and a clear written content help create that more compelling and credible experience. Third, organizations need to align their digital presence with those applicant expectations. As we've said, today's applicants really value transparency. They want clarity around schedules, expectations, and educational opportunities. So the more questions applicants can answer independently, the more confidence they often develop in your program. And then finally, digital experience plays an important role in reinforcing credibility. So whether consciously or subconsciously, applicants are evaluating signals of organizational excellence throughout the entire recruitment process. So a well-maintained website, updated content, and a polished digital presence communicate that your program is organized, it's invested, and it's really attentive to detail. Conversely, outdated information, incomplete content, or really just like vague phrases unintentionally create doubt. So even when the training experience is exceptional. So at a super high level, the digital presence is no longer just this marketing tool. It really is an extension of the applicant experience. Every interaction should reinforce the same message, that this is a program where learners can succeed, grow, and thrive.
Thanks, Hunter. That was great. Lots of actionable steps in there. For our last section, let's shift away from what we're saying about our programs to what applicants are experiencing in the process. One of the most effective ways to think about recruitment, again, is as a journey rather than a collection of individual events. Applicants move through multiple stages from initial awareness to researching programs online, like Hunter was talking about, applying, interviewing, ranking, and ultimately matching. Each stage contributes to the overall perception of your program, and the applicants, again, won't separate these experiences the way we often do as part of the program. Instead, they're going to view them as one continuous experience and one continuous impression of your program. Because of that, consistency between messaging and reality becomes really critical. If your recruitment material and your online material emphasize mentorship, applicants should experience some kind of mentorship when coming for your interview day interactions. If you promote resident wellness, applicants should hear authentic examples from your current residents about their wellness activities. The strongest recruitment experiences are those where every interaction reinforces that same identity and values. That alignment creates confidence and helps applicants envision themselves ultimately as part of your program. Overall, the interview process is often one of the most influential stages of the applicant's journey, even though they're all important, because it's where the applicants interact directly with your program. I really can't overstate how important it is to create a strong positive impression from the onset, just like Hunter was talking about with the website. Clear instructions, transparent timelines, and responsive communication help reduce uncertainty and demonstrate the competence of your program early. The interview day itself should be intentionally designed to showcase your strengths as well. So every agenda item should serve a purpose and reinforce key aspects of your program identity that you've been communicating elsewhere. Consistency also, of course, remains important here as well. Applicants should hear the same themes from leadership when they talk to faculty and in the experiences of the current residents or fellows. That experience helps strengthen the credibility. At the same time, they want it to feel very authentic. Some of the most meaningful moments in your interview process are going to be during the informal conversations with residents, where applicants can ask candid questions and gain insight into the culture of the program directly from the source. The goal overall isn't just to provide information, it's to create an experience that helps applicants understand who you are, what you value, and whether they can actually see themselves thriving in that environment. Now, as you know, the recruitment process does not end when the interview day concludes. The period between interviews and rank list submission is often when applicants are comparing programs and refining their decisions that they've kind of initially come to during the interview phase. While programs definitely should always remain mindful of NRMP guidelines and the match code of conduct, there are still opportunities to reinforce interest and maintain visibility in this period after the official interview season is over. Simple gestures such as a thoughtful follow-up communication can demonstrate professionalism and appreciation, something like a thank you note after interview day. This is also a time where your broader communication channels continue to matter. Applicants are likely going to revisit your websites, re-review your social media content, and seek additional information based on things they heard during the interviews in your online presence. Again, the key is consistency, continuing to reinforce the same differentiators and themes that were highlighted throughout the recruitment process and all of your material that they can follow up with and find more information easily if needed. Ultimately, this stage is about reinforcing confidence and helping applicants remember what made your program distinctive in the first place. As we close out the presentation today and bring everything together, effective recruitment is really the result of alignment. It starts with a clearly defined identity, and from there, that identity informs your positioning, which shapes your messaging, which influences your digital presence, and ultimately guides the applicant experience. Each of these elements builds on the previous one. Programs sometimes focus on tactical solutions, such as updating their website or increasing social media activity, which is certainly important, but the strongest recruitment strategies begin with a clear understanding of who the program is and what they stand for, and then that translates to the type of applicants they're recruiting and how they set up all of their recruitment material. When identity, positioning, messaging, digital environment, and applicant experience are all aligned, applicants receive a consistent and authentic experience throughout the recruitment cycle. And that would ultimately be the goal of any program, not simply attracting more candidates, but attracting the right candidates at the right time who are aligned with your mission, your culture, and your training environment, which will lead to stronger match outcomes and better outcomes for everyone involved.
Thank you, Hunter and Kelsey. We'll now open the floor up for questions from the audience. If you have a question, please type it in the chat. We have a few to start with. So first off, what are the first marketing improvements you'd recommend for a program that is struggling to fill positions?
I think the first step is really to determine whether your challenge is like awareness or consideration or just like that conversion rate. I think a lot of programs immediately assume that they need more advertising, when in reality, maybe applicants are just like dropping off because the program's value proposition is unclear or like difficult to find. I always like recommend like looking at three things. So the first would be like that website audit to evaluate content quality, user experience, and really just the overall applicant pathways. The second would be to review your messaging. So ensure that your program is clearly communicating what makes it unique and distinct. And then lastly, try to conduct like a recruitment funnel analysis and understand where prospective applicants are disengaging.
Thank you. Second, how can programs with limited marketing budgets compete effectively against larger academic organizations?
I'll see, I can tackle this one too. I think programs should avoid trying to outspend like larger institutions, obviously, but instead, like the key thing here is focusing on differentiation. Applicants most of the time are just looking for like that good fit, not always like prestige. Smaller and like community-based programs really have that compelling advantage that deserve like greater visibility, like those strong procedural experiences, lower cost of living, really closer personalized mentorship. And I like highlighting this one, but earlier leadership opportunities. So I always tell clients like the most effective strategy is to clearly articulate what advantages you have available and consistently communicate them across all of your recruitment materials.
Thank you. What are a couple good tactics to drive applicants to the program's Instagram?
I know, Hunter, you're the expert on marketing, but one thing that we talked about in our previous webinar was a lot of video content, short form video content. So I guess you can maybe speak a little on how to get them there, but that's what's been most effective in general is people enjoy short form video content these days. So the more of that you can publish either through stories or through posts on the Instagram, the more engagement you're likely to get because that's the way people like to view things today. They like that kind of like live interaction where you're seeing the people, not just seeing the pictures and the words underneath, but keeping it short so they remain engaged as they're kind of flipping through their feeds.
I agree. And I would also add to like get strategic about the pathway. So like two kind of options are coming to mind. The first would be like ensuring that your Instagram is accessible via your programmatic website. So just have that like hyperlinked in your social channels. And the second is thinking about how they can also get to that Instagram page while they're already on Instagram. So have your residents tag them, maybe have other programs tag them. Like think about other ways that you can be tagged so that they can easily access your page.
Yeah, all good points. Someone's saying, please recommend an effective system to gain resident buy-in on submitting photos and videos for resident-generated content. Residents find sending in content a chore. Is there an easy way to use tech that allows a director to collect photos and content?
Yeah, that's like a barrier that we hear all the time is just like, how do we get this content? Like we have all of these great ideas, but like actualizing it is another challenge. And this is going to sound cheesy, but I would just like try to build it into your program. Like programs that have like a really cool culture, it's easy to capture those moments. And so just like be ensured to be intentional about capturing it. I talk a lot about like a centralized or decentralized approach, especially for content. And while like a centralized or like very like tightly strung like content creation strategy, it's very rigid at times and it's hard to get, but you oftentimes find the most like valuable and consistent content.
Yeah. What are the best tactics for programs who are starting late into the recruitment year? This particular one will not be approved until the end of September.
Definitely recommend having everything ready to go right away. You can go live the same day. I'm sure this will save you a lot of time because we know as soon as it gets approved, people see it on the list of newly approved programs and you're going to get a million emails. So having an email set up, having a page set up that can go live the same day so they can start to read about it and having your social media content ready to go live immediately as well. And then maybe having a couple preset items for your social media that you can put out immediately upon program approval. You just obviously want to be, of course, careful about advertising a program until it's approved. If there was any issue with approval, you wouldn't want that to be public that you had applied and were expecting approval and then didn't.
Yeah, I definitely be prepared. A lot of this can be batched on the back end before publishing. And then we hear this challenge all the time too, but it's like bandwidth. Like this feels like a whole nother job to a lot of our clients is just like developing content. So try to like prioritize, pick like 3 things where you think applicants are actually going to be and prioritize them in your preparation efforts. So instead of feeling like you have to have this very holistic and well-rounded marketing strategy from the onset, really try to prioritize like web page, Instagram, and just like content creation.
I think even in our last webinar, which we'll have to get sent out because I've seen a few people ask about it, we talked a little bit about specific schedules and content you could put out so that way you didn't have to come up with the ideas from scratch. So maybe take a look at that and see if there's anything that you all can use specifically from there so you don't have to think of all of your initial content from scratch.
Great idea.
And how often should programs revisit and update their recruitment messaging and brand strategy?
At the minimum, once a year. I feel like doing like a quarterly an audit and analysis really makes those changes much minor. Like a lot of things are going to change on a smaller frequency every 3 months versus every year. But at the minimum, like ensuring like at least once a year, you're taking like an hour, audit all your materials, and then begin implementing those changes. Kelsey, what do you think?
I totally agree. It reminds me
Yeah.
of annual updates where if you wait until the summer to make all of your updates, it's a lot harder to remember everything that changed until last year. But if you're keeping an ongoing list, your life's going to be a lot easier when it comes to update time.
Yeah, as we talked a lot about the organization and program specifically, but how do you balance the branding between kind of system level with individual program identities?
I think that ties back to what I was kind of alluding at earlier of like a very centralized or decentralized approach, which are kind of the 2 most common paths that we see programs take. So decentralized approach would be like each program has their own culture, their own like branding components, their own like social media platforms, and can kind of have a lot of autonomy and runway with what they can produce. Conversely, you have that centralized approach of like every program, even like content or platform needs to be approved by like the sponsoring institution or health system. And it's like very rigid on what they can and cannot do. It's hard within that centralized approach to really kind of showcase culture, especially if it's unique to your program. Again, I would love to have like a more in-depth conversation about kind of those 2 pathways because each kind of has their own benefits and challenges, but trying to balance like what your overarching organizational like goals are and strategies and the way that they approach content.
Thank you. I think one last question. What are the most common website mistakes that discourage applicants from engaging further with a program?
I always think of like Gen Z, like put yourself in their shoes, especially as this is now like a large percentage of like those applicants is like they don't want to read a lot of text and they want to be able to find the information like very quickly. And they're also very like video centric. So if you can create as much like short form content as possible, like definitely do that. I think, yeah, be concise, be direct, and be honest.
Thank you. In the chat also, Maya has posted our YouTube channel, so you can find the past webinar there if you're interested in listening to that. So thank you to our presenters for the information and insights provided today. In wrapping up our session, we want to thank all of you for participating. And as noted earlier, you'll receive an email this afternoon with a short survey to complete, as well as a copy of the presentation. If you have any outstanding questions after today's presentation, please email Hunter Rich at hrich@germane-solutions.com. It's there on the screen. And for your additional educational information, please know our next webinar will occur in the fall. Details and registration information for this upcoming webinar will be found on LinkedIn and on our website. And our marketing team will ensure that every participant on this webinar receives an email containing the sign-up link for the upcoming webinar. To be included in any future announcements, follow Germane Solutions on LinkedIn or contact us on our website. And we thank you again for your participation in today's webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.